Corporation, the semiconductor company, is scheduled to report quarterly financial results on January 29th, 2025. That has investors asking if they should buy this stock before it announces earnings. I'll answer that question in this video. I'll also provide a preview of what investors should expect from Lam Research Corporation in the upcoming earnings release. Let's take a look at the detail. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. So in the latest quarter, the company reported revenue of $4.17 billion, and that was up 8% from the previous quarter. It was up much more than that from the previous year. I'll discuss those details a little later. The operating margin also increased by 120 basis points. The company is very profitable with an operating margin over 30%. The management team said in the latest quarterly results that looking forward, etch and deposition are fundamental to enabling the next generation of semiconductors, and our investments in key technology inflections positions us well to outperform growth in 2025 and beyond. Management is optimistic, and this is what you like to hear. What you don't like to hear is the opposite of this, where management says, look, we made these investments that we thought were going to work out, but it turns out, no, they're not going to work out. We need to do some restructuring. We're going to let go of an entire team and section and restructure and do all these other things because our investments didn't work out. You like to hear management teams saying, look, we made these investments and they're working very well. Excellent. That's what you like to hear. That's what a management team should be doing. So deferred revenue at the end of September increased to $2 billion, and that was up by roughly $500 million from the previous quarter. So a 33% increase in quarter over quarter in deferred revenue. And that's huge. Deferred revenue eventually turns into revenue. These are sales that the company has contracted, and it cannot recognize as revenue just yet, but it can recognize it at revenue when it fulfills whatever it was that they contracted for. And so this is a good indicator of the company's future revenue expectations. So one thing to keep an eye out for is the company's regional diversification in revenue. The company relies on 37% of its revenue from China, and that's been a big risk lately as the United States has continued to put pressure on semiconductors going into China and semiconductors overall into China. And so this is something that investors will want to keep an eye out for. All things considered, you'd prefer semiconductor companies that are not as exposed to revenue from China. So as we talked about earlier, management is optimistic. They're forecasting the good times to continue with $4.3 billion in revenue expected when they report their quarterly results. They expect the operating margin to remain relatively flat at 30%. And so this is good news if the company does indeed deliver what they are forecasting for the upcoming quarter. I mentioned in the beginning of the video that revenue figures year over year are much stronger than quarter over quarter. The revenue number of $4.167 billion was much higher than the $3.5 billion reported in the same quarter last year. Operating income also jumped to $1.264 billion, up from $1 billion in the same quarter last year, with operating margins rising as well. Looking at cash flow from operations, you see similarly, but even more impressive growth here in cash flow from operations. $1.568 billion reported in the latest quarter. That was up from $951 million in the same quarter last year. So Lam Research Corporation definitely experiencing that upturn in the semiconductor cycle, like the majority of the industry. Some segments of the semiconductor market are not growing as quickly. Lam Research is one of the companies that's benefiting from the growth segments in this industry. Lam Research stock is trading at a forward price to earnings of 19.5, which is near the higher end of where this stock has traded for according to this valuation metric going back a couple of years. But that's only one way to look at valuation. Another way I like to look at valuation is by doing a discounted cash flow model. And I did my latest discounted cash flow model for Lam Research on January 2nd, and so the numbers are still relevant today. The intrinsic value per share I calculated for Lam Research was $50. The current market price is $80, suggesting that according to this metric, the company's stock is overvalued. Now, it does have a higher beta, which means that it's a riskier investment at 1.5. And I did a couple of scenarios where I lowered the beta to see what the value would be if we thought of this company as being lower risk. And at a beta of 1.2, the intrinsic value would have been $59, still under the current market price, so suggesting overvaluation. And even if I lowered the beta to 1, it would increase the intrinsic value to 74, which again, compared to the current market price of 80, well, this would be closer to fairly valued as it would be closer to my margin of safety here in the discounted cash flow models. But the valuations suggest that this is not a cheap stock. And when I'm thinking about buying a stock before earnings tend to be a high risk event with the price moving larger than it usually does. Sometimes it can change a stock price by 50%, depending on what happens in the earnings release. And so these are volatile events. And I only like to buy big allocations before earnings if I feel that there's a significant undervaluation, which I don't see here for Lam Research. If anything, I think this stock is fairly valued. And so I don't have this stock rated as a buy. I have it rated as a hold. I last updated it today, January 17th. So to answer the question, should you buy this stock before earnings? I would say no. I would say this is one of those situations where you can wait to see the earnings results, digest the information, and then make a decision after the company announces these results. Sure, you run the risk of missing out on a gain on the upside, but I think those risks are less than the risk of experiencing a stock price decline following the earnings release. So if you were to ask me, I think the more prudent decision for Lam Research investors is to wait until after the earnings release and then make a decision after you digest those results. Hey everyone, I'm excited to announce that my book is finally available for sale. I've been working on it for more than a year now, so I'm really excited to finally share this with you now. It goes through my framework for evaluating stocks. Some of you often ask why I like this stock or why I like the other stock, and this framework provides you the things that I look at when I'm evaluating stocks. I've added the link in the description below.